best coverage of London sport 7 days a week.
This is BBC London 94.9.
And good evening from Nick Godwin and the sports team here on BBC London 94.9. Still a couple of hours to go before we say cheerio, and plenty to pack in as well. We've got Tessa Sanderson, Kelly Holmes joining us from a training camp in Portugal, and we're also going to be talking about baseball in a few moments' time. And if you are stranded by the rain, as I said, this is the best place to stick around for the next couple of hours or so. All the travel news, as you'd expect here on BBC London 94.9, but plenty more besides as well. And right now, we're going to talk baseball. Later this month, the National Baseball Championships takes place in Croydon. It's the showpiece conclusion of the 3 baseball leagues that take place in Britain. The 4 finalists in the British National Basketball League, which is the equivalent of the Premier League in football terms, are all based in and around the London area. The London Mets, Richmond Flames, Herts Falcons and the Bracknell Blazers. I'm delighted to say we've got several guests in the studio now to talk baseball. John Walmsley, the BBF Secretary, also General Manager of Richmond Baseball Club. David Shea, I hope I've got that right. Is it David Shea? Great, thank you. The General Manager of the Essex Arrows Baseball Club, and Mark Salter, President of the Bracknell Baseball Club. We're going to be joined by some of your colleagues on the phone a little bit later, but welcome all 3 of you. I think most people would be unaware of how deep baseball has penetrated in Britain, as it were. Other American sports, you know, we see them play at Wembley and so on, the basketball and the American basketball, the O2, American football at Wembley. But if one of you would like to just tell us how big or how small or how big a deal baseball is in London. There's some finger pointing going on. John, I think you're the nominated speaker.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leap in here. So, I mean, baseball's been around in Britain in an organised form for over 120 years. The first recognised British champion was Preston North End. In London, Tottenham Hotspur won with the national championships in 1910. So there's a deep heritage of baseball in the country. It's waxed and waned over the years. Right now, I'd like to say it's on an upswing. I mean, it's a small sport. We've probably got a couple of thousand participants in recognised leagues, both adult and youth. And over the last 20, 25 years, we've seen a growth in the sport at youth coming through. Previously, in the 50s and 60s, it was a hangover from the American Air Force being over here. In the Second World War, they exported the game to a number of countries. So that's kind of where we are right now. A few thousand participants. It's a sport, some form of bat and ball, baseball, softball sports being played in about a quarter of British schools right now. So it's out there.
David, you're from the Essex Arrows. Where do you play?
We play in Waltham Abbey in Essex. That's our home ground, but we also play when we travel to Croydon, out to Bristol, basically all over.
And I asked that question because I thought it can't be easy to find baseball pitches around, you know, the London area in particular. I mean, there aren't just bits of large tracts of ground. You can just say, oh, we'll turn this to a baseball pitch if everyone's all right with that, especially around, you know, this heavily built-up part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. However, our field has been there since, well, in the 1970s. And we've just built on it. We've got a great relationship with the Waltham Abbey Town Council. We've got a fully enclosed field, major league, if you like, dirt infield. And, I mean, it's a huge area which has been allocated for baseball in Waltham Abbey. And in the other areas where we go to play, I mean, they've had the same thing in the same, like, if you like, with the local councils. But there are new grounds being developed now, you know, on those free areas, free land, as you were saying. So
good stuff. Well, Mark, I mean, you're from Bracknell. Yep. There must be a huge... It's bringing youngsters in. We talk about this with so many different sports. There are, you know, so many distractions. Everyone always says football is omnipresent. There are video games. There's TV. There's of all the sports people are going to play. How do you make sure you bring in, you know, young people to play baseball?
Because we work very hard. We have some people who, without their efforts, we wouldn't have the club that we have today. They go out into the lower schools and the upper schools, and they just plug the game. They get participation at the schools, what we call taster sessions. People like Paul Vernon, who's my vice president, he's a long-time coach, been involved in the GB setup and everything, goes out there and does a great job of getting these kids interested. And once you get that little snippet of interest, you never know what comes out of it. And our kids programme, and I hope John will agree with this, is probably the most successful in the country, in as much as we've had 6 national championships in the last 6 years. Looking for a 7th this year, I hope.
Oh, well, I understand there's a big event coming up, and we'll
Yep.
you know that's obviously going to. I hope we'll get peaceful rain because it's obviously a very intense rivalry. But I mean, you talked about the youngsters, and there are some sports in this country that people just seem to know the rules to. You know, people, even basketball. You know, it's all relatively simple. Football, obviously, everyone knows. Cricket, you know, people's dads tend to know. It must be difficult to get people to play a sport where you have to teach them the rules first, quite often.
It can be. I mean, at Richmond we've started a youth programme last year for under-13s, and you can say something what you think is very basic to a 7 or 8-year-old, but because they haven't had that cultural reference growing up seeing it on television, so you say, run to first base and touch it, which means run to first base, put your foot on it. Well, they run to first base, lean down and put their hand on it. And yes, you're absolutely right. It's that kind of basics that for children that would have grown up with a sport just part of their culture, watching football on television, being aware of cricket and rugby and those kind of sports, it is challenging. But there are ways to overcome it, and we're aware of that. So once you're aware of that, then you make sure you're coaching that in. But we know from experience that where we've participated, I said about schools programs, where there's been mixed sports school weeks at schools. They maybe do soccer on a Monday, they'll do baseball on a Tuesday. They don't want to do baseball to begin with. You stick a glove on their hand, 2 hours later you can't take it off. There's something about it that for most people when they try it for the first time can create a bug in them.
And I suppose, Mark, David,
That's
you.
right.
I suppose the kids that can play football will play football, and baseball may be something they never thought of. And if someone gets the chance and happens to have an aptitude for it, then more so than someone that may play football, say once a week. If someone tries a sport they hadn't thought of before and does well and enjoys it, then you've probably got them.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we went into King Harold School, which is the only secondary school in Waltham Abbey, a few weeks back, and we had equipment from Baseball Softball UK. And we went in there and we took gloves, balls, bats, gave them to the kids. And, like John said, we couldn't get it off of them at the end of the break. And, we had 18 kids sign up for the youth team. And, we've got our first official youth practice on next Thursday, the 13th of August. So, it's fantastic. As you say, I mean, the kids, they're so enthusiastic about it as soon as you give them the ball and the glove. And, it's great for us and great for the development of the sport.
Because unlike like American football, I suppose, but then again, you don't have to have all the kit. It is the ball and the glove and the bat, and it is actually quite simple. I would have thought it's not perhaps as complicated as you might think. And to play it, to practice it, to the American phrase, to throw the ball around is actually a very simple and easy thing to do. It
is, but I'd put a caveat in there and say that it's not the easiest equipment to purchase if you're Joe Schmo on the street.
No, I'm sure. Yeah, tell us
we
about
have
that.
Inside track, obviously, and obviously the other thing is that you can accumulate equipment over a period of time. People maybe donate gloves that they don't use anymore, things like that. But people are ingenious in the way that they get their equipment when they're on holiday in America, for example. They get them across the internet, that kind of stuff. But David mentioned BSUK, who, if you do want to go and do any of these activities in schools and so on, they're only too willing to help, and they bring along a bag of equipment. So you don't actually have to have any of your own to hand out to the kids. Right. They will provide all of that.
Oh, some of the other American sports, when I say American sports, you said there's a long tradition of baseball in this country, but the sports that are really big in America, we see it quite a lot in London, where they bring big American stars over. When they've been playing these basketball matches at the O2 and the American football at Wembley, and you see some of the very biggest names from these sports in America coming over, talking to kids and so on. Would that be possible? Is it something you might consider? If you bring if a big baseball, if they wanted to promote it, and I'm not sure how or when it would happen, but conceivably bring a big baseball star over, suddenly you've got kids signing autographs in it, and they can talk to the kids, and it has a real impact. Is that something that you've thought of, or?